The Little Bookroom by Eleanor Farjeon. Leaving Paradise. This is a French counting out game, like R, eeny, meeny, meeny, mo, which I heard sung in Normandy by two little girls, the children of the white and among the apple trees, where I stayed once for a few days. The younger child, Yvonne, was a gay little thing who thought of nothing but playing with her ball, which seemed to satisfy all her wants. The elder, Genevieve, was grave and knowing. She asked me once if there were fairies in England, and when I said I thought so, shrugged her shoulders and murmured, "Not possible." Yet in her father's field stood one of those queer little huts, to be found in almost every Norman orchard, which might well belong to a witch, and just across the way there was behind a gate a flower garden so beautiful that it might well have been owned by a fairy. I never succeeded in getting into either the hut or the garden, and could only guess at their inhabitants. It was not long after she had put the question that I heard Genevieve singing with Yvonne the song, which in English would run something like this: Three little princes leaving paradise, mouth hanging open until tomorrow noon. Clarinet, clarinet. My wooden shoes make spectacles. Peach, apple, apricot, one too many in the pot. Lift it with the ladle, and out goes he. I did not ask Genevieve what it all meant. She could not have told me. All she knew was that she had sung the funny medley of nonsense all her life, when she and Yvonne were playing their games. As for what it meant exactly, who could say? Perhaps it meant that after all, Genevieve, there are fairies in France, not possible? There were once three little princes who lived in paradise. Their names were Felix, Crispin, and Theodore, and if you want to know what paradise looked like, it was a land of apple and apricot, plum and peach trees, of magical meadows carpeted with flowers. Close rows of poplar trees stretched like a green curtain between one meadow and the next, of corncocks bright as gold, and rivers brighter than silver. Felix, Crispin, and Theodore had their own little white house and their own little garden, which they shared together for sleeping and eating in, but being free to do what they liked, as often as not one or other would stroll away for a day, or a month, or 100 years or so, to sleep, play, and eat in one of the numberless little huts which sprang up like mushrooms among the fruit trees. The huts were so pretty that no little prince could ever see one without wanting to go into it. Then, too, there were the meadows, which were so flowery that they could not pass by without loitering there to gather magical-colored bunches to bring back to Yvonne. And with the river to swim in and the whispering poplars to climb in, you would have thought the little princes must be as happy as the day was long. And so they were. And small wonder, seeing that they had Yvonne to look after them. She it was who kept their rooms swept, their beds made, and their supper ready in the pot. She did all this by means of one of her 3 crystal balls, which she would toss into the air, clapping her hands as she cried out a single word of command, such as ladle, blankets, or darning needle. Then, as she caught the ball again, the ladle stirred the pot on the fire and dipped out big portions of the delicious fruits that were stewing there for Theodore's supper, and the blankets tucked themselves cozily round Crispin's bed. while the darning needle threaded itself with wool and mended the hole Felix had rubbed in the knee of his stocking while climbing the tallest tree in paradise. The one thing that never needed mending was the prince's shoes, for they all wore wooden sabots that lasted forever. There was in all paradise only one garden they never entered, and only one hut to which they never succeeded in finding the door. The garden was the most beautiful of all, and the hut the queerest. Many a time the princes pressed their little noses against the gate of the garden and the dingy window of the hut to see what they could see, but they did not see much beyond the flowers crowding to the gate and the dirt upon the pane. One day, as Theodore sat by his house whittling a boat to sail on the river, he heard a high voice tittering tee-hee, tee-hee, tee-hee on the other side of the hedge. Looking up, he saw that the sound was made by a queer little woman with very bright eyes and a very sharp nose, whom he had never seen before. "What are you tittering at?" asked Theodore. "You," said the bright-eyed woman. "Why?" asked Theodore. "Because the tip of your nose is as black as a little black pebble." "So would yours be," said Theodore, "if you had rubbed it on a dirty window pane." "I should never dream of rubbing my nose on a dirty window pane," said the little woman, without a very good reason. "Well, I had," said Theodore. "What was it, pray?" "I wanted to find out who lived behind the window." "And who does?" "I couldn't see, so I don't know." "What a pity," said the little woman. "Is it?" asked Theodore. "Ah," said the little woman, wagging her head, "catch me being content not to know what I wanted to know." Theodore looked at the little woman, and all of a sudden it did seem to him a pity not to know who lived in the hut. For the first time in his life, he felt a twinge in his mind. "Perhaps you can tell me who lives there?" "Not I, Theodore." "Why, you know my name," said Theodore. "Certainly. You are Theodore, so how can I help knowing it?" "My name is Clarinet." Theodore looked at her again and saw that of course she was Clarinet. "Well, Clarinet, why can't you tell me?" "I can tell you nothing about paradise because I don't belong here. I live in the greatest city in the world and know everything about the world that there is to be known." "Ah, it is a wonderful thing to know what to believe and what not to believe." "What do you believe in, Clarinet?" "Fine clothes, for one thing," said Clarinet. "Look and see." She hopped up on a bench in the road so that Theodore could see the grand lace frock she wore and the rich fur cape. She kicked up one little foot and pointed at him the toe of her embroidered high-heeled slipper. "Tee-hee, tee-hee, tee-hee," tittered Clarinet. "That's how we dress in the city, where we know our own minds. But in paradise, tee-hee, you wear wooden shoes and can't see through a window pane." So saying, she hopped down off the bench and clattered away up the road, tittering as she went. That evening Theodore came barefoot to supper. The three little princes sat round the table with their spoons and bowls all ready for what might come out of the pot. Just as Yvonne was about to toss her ball, Theodore asked, "Yvonne, who lives in the hut in the field?" Yvonne held her ball very tight and said, "Must you ask questions, little prince?" "I only wondered," said Theodore. "Go on wondering," said Yvonne. "I'm hungry, Yvonne," cried Crispin, beating his bowl on the table. In a moment, said Yvonne, and prepared once more to throw her ball. But once more Theodore asked, "Who does, Yvonne?" Again Yvonne checked herself. "Do you want to leave paradise, little prince?" said she. "No, of course not." "Then don't ask questions." "But I only want to know," persisted Theodore. "Alas," said Yvonne. "Yvonne, I want my supper," shouted Felix, knocking his bowl on the table. "Just coming," said Yvonne, and for the third time she started to throw her ball, crying supper as she clapped her hands. But at the same moment Theodore called out, "Who lives in the hut?" and startled her so that the crystal ball dropped at her feet and smashed to atoms. And instead of the fragrant portions of fruit that the ladle should have brought up from the pot, out popped a single peach all by itself, and fell plop into Theodore's bowl, so that his mouth fell open with surprise. A bright tear formed in Yvonne's right eye, and she said, "One too many in the pot." "Oh, why must you start asking questions? If you must know, a witch lives in the hut." And so, Theodore, out you go. "Out where?" he asked. "Out of paradise." Theodore grew as red as a turkey cock and cried, "I'll go. Who cares about old paradise? I'm going to the biggest city in the world, where they wear fine clothes and fur and can answer questions." Yvonne nodded her head sadly, saying, "Goodbye, little prince. Put on your sabots before you depart." "Not me," said Theodore. "Clumsy old wooden shoes." "I shall have embroidered shoes with golden heels." "Yet wear your wooden shoes till you get there," begged Yvonne, "for the road will be rough, going and coming." "I shan't come back till tomorrow noon," cried Theodore, "and that will be never, because tomorrow never comes." "You'll go hungry till you do," said Yvonne, holding out his sabots. But Theodore pushed them away and stamped out of the house, his mouth still hanging open because he wanted his supper. Crispin and Felix stared after him till he had disappeared beyond the gate, and then they thumped their bowls on the table and called, "We're hungry. Yvonne, we're hungry." "On the spot," said Yvonne, and fetching her second crystal ball, she threw it into the air, clapped her hands, cried supper, and at once the sweet steam rose from the pot, and the ladle scooped out fruit and syrup into the prince's bowls till they were running over. While they ate, Yvonne stowed the broken bits of crystal into Theodore's wooden shoes, wrapped them up, and put them away on a shelf in the cupboard. A year later, as Crispin was sitting by the door making arrows for his bow, he heard a tiny giggle on the other side of the hedge. "Tee-hee, tee-hee, tee-hee," it went, so that he had to look up, and there was a queer little woman with a very sharp nose and two very bright eyes, laughing at him for all she was worth. "What's funny?" asked Crispin, eager to join in the joke. "You are," said the sharp-nosed woman. "Why me?" "Because your forehead is crisscrossed all over with black, like shadows on the road." "That must be where I pressed it against the gate to see the person in the garden." "What person's that?" "I never saw, so I don't know." Too bad," said the little woman. "Is it?" asked Crispin. "Not to see what you try to see?" "I should think so," said the little woman, throwing up her hands. And Crispin, struck by her action, felt that it was too bad not to know who lived in the garden. His mind felt its very first pang. You tell me, he urged her. Not me, Crispin. How did you know I was Crispin? Because you are. And I am Clarinet. Why? So you are, and so I am. But do tell me. I can tell you all manner of things, but I can't tell you that. I can tell you whatever I want to know myself, but I don't want to know who lives in the garden in paradise. What do you want to know then? I want to know the affairs of my neighbor in the city, and how much money she has, and if she can afford grander clothes than mine. Look there now. And hopping onto the bench, she fluttered her laces and furs and showed him the tip of her rich slipper. Tee-hee, tee-hee, giggled Clarinet. These things are worth knowing, these are. These are what's what in the world. But you clump about paradise and sabots and don't know how to open a shut gate. Saying which, she stepped down from the bench and went clicking up the road in her high-heeled shoes. Crispin kicked his sabots off at once and kept them off for the rest of the day, and as he sat barefoot at the supper table, while Yvonne prepared to throw her ball, he suddenly asked her, "Who does live in the garden over the road, Yvonne?" Yvonne clutched the ball and said, "Why ask questions, little prince?" "I just wondered." "Go on wondering," said Yvonne. "Isn't supper coming?" asked Felix, bumping his bowl on the table. "Just ready," said Yvonne. But before she could throw the ball, Crispin urged again, "No, but you might tell me." Yvonne held on to her ball and said, "Don't you like living in paradise, little prince?" "Of course I do." "Then no more questions." "But why, who, what?" stammered Crispin. "Alas," sighed Yvonne. "What about supper?" shouted Felix, rolling his bowl round and round on the table. "Immediately," said Yvonne, tossed her ball, clapped her hands, and cried, "Supper." But Crispin at the same moment began to exclaim, "Why, why, 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 why," and upset her so that she missed the ball, and it smashed into smithereens at her feet. Then out of the pot jumped a single apple and dropped with a splash into the middle of Crispin's bowl, so that his mouth made a round, startled "oh." A big tear welled up in Yvonne's left eye, and she said, "One too many in the pot. If only you wouldn't ask questions. If you will have it, a fairy lives in the garden. And now, Crispin, out you go." "Why?" asked Crispin. "Because nobody asks questions in paradise." "But why?" "Because then it isn't paradise." "But you might tell me why, Yvonne." "That's enough," said Yvonne. "Oh, all right," said Crispin, strutting about. "Then I'll go to the city and ask Clarinet, and she'll give me such fine clothes to wear that I'll be grander than her neighbor." Yvonne shook her head sorrowfully, saying, "Goodbye, little prince. Don't forget to put your sabots on." "Why?" asked Crispin. "The road is hard, going and coming," said she. "I'm going, but I'm not coming," declared Crispin. "I shall come no sooner than tomorrow noon, which never does." "You'll go unfed till you do," said Yvonne, offering him his sabots. But Crispin wouldn't look at them and ran out of the house with his mouth still making an O. As soon as he was out of sight, Felix banged the table with his bowl and bawled, "I'm hungry, Yvonne, I'm hungry." "There you are, then," said Yvonne, and fetching her third and last crystal ball, she tossed and clapped and called out supper. In a moment, the big ladle had filled Felix's bowl to overflowing, and while he was gobbling, Yvonne filled Crispin's sabots with the crystal splinters and put them away in the cupboard beside Theodore's. It was just a year later that Felix, sitting by the door making mud pies, heard a high cackle on the other side of the hedge. That made him look up, and there was a queer little woman, bright of eye and sharp of nose, saying tee-hee, 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 as though she never could stop. So Felix began to laugh too, and then she did stop. "Why are you laughing?" said she. "Because you are," said Felix merrily. "Well, don't you want to know why I am?" asked the little woman. "Laughing's nice," said Felix. "That all depends," said the little woman tartly. "Shall I tell you why I laughed?" "If you like." "I laughed because one of your cheeks has a big smudge on it, and the other is all streaked with black." "How funny," said Felix, and laughed more heartily than ever. This appeared to vex the little woman. She asked in an irritated way, "Why are they so dirty?" "I expect it was when I was listening at the window and the gate." "Ah, there we are then. What were you listening for?" "Just listening," said Felix, turning out another mud pie. "I suppose," coaxed the little woman, "you wanted very much to know who lived behind the gate and the window. Was that it?" Felix looked at her with big eyes and said mysteriously, "I didn't hear a sound." "Not one single sound. Here's a cream ice pudding for you." "That's not a cream ice pudding, little silly. It is a mud pie." Felix laughed gleefully. "It's got green nuts on it, and sticky cherries, and chocolate sauce. See?" "No, I don't see, Felix," said the little woman crossly. "Oh, poor Clarinet," said Felix. "How did you know I was Clarinet?" snapped she. "Because you are," said Felix, and offered her another pie. "Here's a chicken cooked in cream." "It's nothing of the sort." "And here's a beautiful brown soup with red wine in it." "It's not, I tell you." "It's nothing but mud." Said Felix, smacking his lips and rubbing his stomach. "Come with me, and I'll give you real soup and real chicken and a real ice pudding as I do your two brothers, and I'll dress you in fine clothes and show you the world." "Oh, I am so full," sighed Felix, rolling blissfully over onto his face. "Little idiot," cried Clarinet shrilly as she sprang onto the bench. "Don't you want to know about your brothers? Don't you want to find out about fine food and grand clothes? Don't you want to know what the world is like? Do you never ask questions?" "Why do I ask all the questions?" "I expect because you want to know," said Felix. "Know what, pray?" cried Clarinet, beside herself with annoyance. "I expect you want to know who lives behind the window and the gate." "Who does, then?" screamed Clarinet. Felix looked at her with big eyes, lifted his finger, and whispered, "I didn't hear a single sound." With a yell of rage, Clarinet sprang off the seat and went clicking up the road as fast as a trotting pony. That evening Felix sat at table with his empty bowl held ready, and just as Yvonne was about to toss the ball for supper, he remarked, "I expect I'm going to leave paradise, Yvonne." Yvonne caught her ball to her heart. "Felix," Are you two going to begin asking questions? What do you want to know? I think, said Felix, I will go to my brother's. You also, sighed Yvonne. And bring them back again, said Felix. As he said it, an apricot popped out of the pot all by itself and fell plump into his bowl. He opened his mouth to eat it up, but Yvonne said gaily, Not yet, not yet. Still one too many in the pot. Out you go, Felix. Have you got your sabots? It's a stony road home. They're on my feet, Yvonne. I expect I'd better take my brother's sabots too. Here they are then, and goodbye, little prince, said she. Come back soon, for you'll be hungry till you do. I'll be back by tomorrow noon for certain, Yvonne. And so the third little prince left paradise with his mouth open. It is a quick step from paradise to the world, once you decide to take it, and Felix was at the city gates in a brace of shakes. It was still evening when he arrived. A river spanned by fine bridges ran through the middle of the city, dividing it into two halves. In one half the banks were bordered with trees and flower beds, ornamental lakes and palaces, and gay places where people sat and ate or danced in the open air. This side of the city was lit with thousands of golden lamps. The other side was darker. Felix wandered among the trees, wondering on which side he would find his brothers. All round him rolled carriages with prancing horses driven by coachmen who cracked their whips and never stopped shouting. This seemed great fun to Felix, and he stood still in the middle of the road, enjoying the noise and lively movement going on about him. Suddenly the shouts and excitement grew twice as loud as before, and Felix felt his shoulder seized by a tall man with a stick in his hand. Now then, my little fellow, do you want to get run over? He demanded. No, said Felix. Then don't stand in the middle of things. You'd better run along home. I can't yet, said Felix. Why not? Are you lost? Not at all, said Felix. I know quite well that I am in the world, and that it is not paradise. The tall man shook with laughter. That's something to know, that is, said he. Well, and what are you doing in the world tonight? I am looking for my brothers, said Felix. Then you are lost, said the man. Not at all, repeated Felix. I have only lost them, and it is very important to find them by tomorrow noon. Where are they? How should I know? I ought to have told you, said Felix, that they are Theodore and Crispin. Oh, I see, said the man, winking at the crowd that had collected. Theodore and Crispin. Well, you will no doubt find them on the top of the Eiffel Tower. Thank you, said Felix. A dozen laughing voices told him that he must cross the water by the next bridge, so he followed the river through the trees and lights, and the crowd followed Felix. Before he reached the bridge, his nose was assailed by the most tempting of smells, and he remembered that he had had no supper and was very hungry. So he stopped at the place the smells came from. It was the gayest of places, as gay as any in that gay city. Many tables spread with delicious food stood under colored umbrellas among the trees. Lights flashed among the leaves. Music played from a white pavilion where waiters were moving to and fro with platters of fruit, dishes of ices, and decanters of wine. Round the tables sat men and women in brilliant dresses, with jewels on their hands and in their hair. Some danced, some ate and drank. Snatches of song and ripples of talk and laughter filled the air. You would have thought that there was no such thing as sorrow in the world. Yet just beyond the riches and the gaiety, in the deep shadows of a tree outside, 3 beggars crouched unnoticed, an old woman and her 2 sons, taking in the lights and sounds and smells so near at hand. As the mirth and music sounded louder, one of the beggar boys said, "Ah, it's a gay life." And the other, "Who'd live anywhere but in the city?" And the ragged old woman nodded her head and chuckled. "Didn't I tell you? Eh? What did I tell you?" And she peered at the scene through an old pair of spectacles, which she lent now and then to the boys. They seemed to have no other idea than to look on. But Felix did not think of doing that. He went straight up to a table laden with good things and reached out his hand for a bunch of grapes. Before he could take it, his wrist was seized by a man who was sitting with a party of people at the table. "Here, here, what are you doing?" asked the man. Felix wondered at the simple questions that people kept on asking, but he answered very nicely all the same. "I am taking some grapes," he explained. "What for?" asked the man. "Because I haven't had my supper." "Did you ever?" exclaimed the man. One of the party said, "Never in my life," and a lady laughed, and another snorted, and the master of the pavilion came running out to see what was the matter. All sorts of voices told him at once. This little boy came right up to our table and tried to take some grapes. He said he was doing it because he hadn't had supper. There's a reason for you. The idea. The master of the pavilion addressed Felix, who stood there with his mouth open. "You can't come taking grapes like that," he said. "I do at home," said Felix. "Well, this is not your father's vineyard. If you want grapes here, you must pay for them. What have you got in your pockets?" Felix drew forth the 2 pairs of sabots, saying, "These. But I am taking them to my brother's, and I see you have some shoes already on your feet, so you will not need them." At this the people began to laugh so loud that Felix was obliged to laugh with them, and then their laughter changed to a sweeter sound, and a lady put the grapes into his hand, saying, "Where are your brothers, and who are they?" "They are Theodore and Crispin, and they are on the top of the Eiffel Tower." "Who told you that?" asked the master. Felix looked at the crowd behind him and said, "Those kind people." "It is a shame," cried the lady who had given him the grapes, and a man stepped out of the crowd and said, "You are right. It was just a joke. But we will help the child to find his brothers." "We too," cried the party who had been feasting. "And we," cried all the rest of the diners and dancers. "Thank you," said Felix. "It will be quite easy, because they live with Clarinet, who wears a lace dress and a fur cape and has embroidered shoes." "Clarinet? It is this Clarinet, then, we must find," cried the lady. She took Felix by the hand and led him on, and everyone followed them, for they all began to feel how important it was for Felix to find his brothers. Now began a search all over the city. They hunted on this side of the river and on that. They went to the top of the hill of Montmartre and all round the foot of the Eiffel Tower. Some said, "Let us go to the Triumphal Arch," and others, try the woods of Boulogne, and others. They may be in the circus of Lutetia. Everybody knew some part of the city to suggest, and they tried them all. Wherever they went, the crowd gathered and grew. People ran out from the shops and houses and places of amusement to see what was afoot, and were told, "We are looking for Clarinet, who dresses in furs and laces, and has charge of Theodore and Crispin, the brothers of this child." And whoever looked at Felix exclaimed at once, "Yes, yes, the child must find his brothers. Such a child must not be lost in the city." And Felix explained over and over again, "I am not lost. I have only lost my brothers. I know quite well that I am not in paradise." In the end, the whole of the city turned out to follow Felix in his search for his brothers. There was not a soul who felt he could be at peace till they were found. But Felix wondered more and more that none of them knew Theodore or Crispin or Clarinet. "For that is who they are," he said. And someone answered, "Ah, my child, no matter who you are, it is only too easy to pass through the world unknown." "In paradise," explained Felix, "everybody knows everybody." So they went on till daybreak, and at last, weary and out of breath, the whole city halted under the trees where the search had begun, and the gray light fell upon the tables littered with food, and on the three beggars still crouched under the tree. "It is useless," said the master of the pavilion. "We had better have breakfast." "Alas, yes," sighed the lady who had Felix by the hand, "we must give it up and have breakfast." "Let everybody enter," said the master, waving his hand generously towards the pavilion, for he had come to feel that night as though the great search had made them all brothers. And the crowd began to melt away beyond the door, eager for coffee and fresh rolls. As they moved off among the tables with the gay umbrellas, even the three beggars crept out from under the tree, for the master had said everybody. But when his eye fell upon the only three people in the city who had not joined in the search, he said roughly, "Not you. Not you," and thrust them back again. Then, as all eyes turned upon them, Felix dropped the lady's hand and ran up to the old woman and the ragged boys, crying joyfully, "Theodore, Crispin, Clarinet," and he threw his arms around their necks, embracing them. You should have heard the crowd begin to murmur then. "Theodore," he said, "and Crispin, are those the famous brothers? And Clarinet, who wears fine furs and laces? Do but look at her rags and theirs. Yes, and even this boy, whom we have been following all night, he's not much better than the rest." And as the light of dawn grew grayer, and the morning air more nippy, they rubbed their eyes and saw that Felix was but a little boy with rough hair and holes in his stockings from climbing trees. Of a sudden, the whole city felt ashamed of itself for the manner in which it had been led away. "Who are you, you three boys?" cried the people. And Felix, with his arms about his brothers' necks, explained, "We are little princes in paradise." The crowd roared at him. "And who is the old witch?" they cried through their laughter. But Felix had done with answering their questions. He smiled at Clarinet and lifted his finger as though he might be listening at a window. Then the crowd shrugged its shoulders and said "Pooh," and went into the pavilion, leaving the four of them alone. Soon through the trees floated the fragrant smell of coffee, and the three hungry boys sat with open mouths, breathing it in. Clarinet did likewise, chuckling. Ah, it's a fine life in the city. Here we do know what's what. Yes, said Theodore, shivering in his rags. How glad I am I came. And I, said Crispin. Only smell the coffee. Lend me your spectacles, Clarinet, so that I can see what's on the tables better. The food looks just like so much mud without them. You can't have them, grumbled Clarinet. I want them for myself. You boys are always snatching. When I am rich, I'll have a gold pair of my own, boasted Theodore. Me, too, said Crispin, with diamonds in them, when I'm rich. Then I'll be able to see the world for myself, said Theodore. Just as it really is, said Crispin. You can see it now with your own eyes, said Felix. What can we see, I'd like to know? Asked Theodore. You can see me. What of it? Who are you? I am Felix, said Felix, wondering. Who's Felix? Asked Crispin. Your brother. Not possible, said Theodore. Felix grew in wonder. And you can see paradise. There is no paradise, said Theodore. Not possible, said Crispin. I've come to take you back, said Felix, to the apple and poplar trees, and to Yvonne with her ball, and to the witch's hut and the fairy's garden. There are no witches, said Theodore. There are no fairies, said Crispin. Clarinet glanced at Felix with her sharp, bright eyes. Witches in paradise, said she. Witches are fairies in paradise, said Felix. And Clarinet muttered, Is it possible? Do come, said Felix. Look, I have brought your sabots, but don't put them on till I've emptied out the glass. He drew the wooden shoes from his pockets and turned them upside down, but to his surprise they were already empty. Only in the sole of each shoe a little hole had been worn, no bigger than an eyeball, and in each hole was fitted a round glass, as clear as crystal. Theodore and Crispin snatched the shoes from his hand. Are these my sabots? Cried one. Are these mine? Cried the other. And both together shouted, Now we've got spectacles at last. Clarinet, Clarinet, our sabots make us spectacles. Now we can see things for ourselves. In high glee, they held the wooden shoes up to their eyes and stared through the crystals in the soles. Oh, oh, cried Theodore. I can see my favorite apple tree. I can see the tallest poplar, cried Crispin. And there's the silver river, and the golden corncocks. There's the witch's window, and the fairy's gate, and the fruit pot steaming, and Yvonne throwing her ball. Then both cried together, There's our brother Felix. And the three boys fell into one another's arms. In a flash, Theodore and Crispin had their feet in their shoes, and when the people of the city came out of the pavilion, all they could see was a trio of ragged boys as the three little princes went running back to paradise. But of Clarinet, the old woman they had called a witch, there was never a trace, no, not a single sound. The little princes arrived on the very tick of tomorrow noon. Yvonne was watching for them at the door, and how she laughed to see them coming with their mouths hanging open. We're hungry, Yvonne. We're hungry, they clamored. Is dinner ready? Half a jiffy, laughed Yvonne, While I prepare it, you'd better eat up what you left in your bowls. Each fell on his own bowl at table and ate the fruits of paradise, Theodore his peach, Crispin his apple, and Felix his apricot. None too many in the pot, sang Yvonne, and she tossed her ball, clapped her hands, called out dinner, and in a moment the ladle had filled the bowls as full as they could hold. The boys gobbled away for dear life. But between two big mouthfuls, Theodore suddenly paused and cried, "I know something." "What do you know, then?" laughed Yvonne. "I know that a witch lives in the hut because you told me so." "And I know something," shouted Crispin with his mouth full. "What do you know, then?" asked Yvonne. "I know a fairy lives in the garden because you said she did." "We don't know their names, though," said Felix. "They have only one name between them," said Yvonne. "And it cannot be said, it can only be heard." The three princes cocked their ears, and Felix, lifting his finger, said, "I think I can hear something." "Something squeaky," said Theodore, "like a rusty window hinge." "Something sweet," said Crispin, "like a drop of honey in a flower." "Something," said Felix, "like a sort of flute." "It's possible," said Yvonne. "Oh," cried the little princes, "I wonder what it is." "Go on wondering," said Yvonne, and tossed her crystal ball for second helpings.